folks. Greg Pardo with Exabeam, user behavior analytics, right? So I've got some slides. I'm going to go through them very quickly, and just to kind of tee up what it is we do and what the space is, if you haven't heard of it yet or heard of us. And then we're going to go into a demo. Love to show off the product, especially as a sales guy. Love to be able to show how easy it is to demo the product. I think if you guys are familiar with technologies, the UIs typically, in most cases, get very cumbersome, very complex, and we were all pretty much at Imperva prior to Exabeam and selling web app firewall, database activity monitoring, and very complex tools, right? So we're trying to make this one very easy and straightforward. So user behavior analytics. So today's security problem, right, is products can't detect modern attacks, right? Because the modern attack today, they're not after the machine anymore, they're after the user's credentials, right? So once they have a user's credentials, they get onto the network and they're moving laterally, they're shifting credentials, they're changing IPs, right? Very difficult for traditional security tools to keep up with that and try to figure out, okay, is that legitimate traffic or is that a bad guy, right? So here we see people can't respond quickly, and that's because of all the security alerts, right? So all the security alerts, the alert fatigue that we all suffer from today, right? Everybody in the SOC, Mary from who runs the SOC at Johnson & Johnson would have been a great conversation, because from a response standpoint and what people do in the SOC on a day-to-day basis and trying to get down to what the issue is and what the problem is and get down to the bottom of it, very difficult to do with today's technology, and a lot of times it's analysts trying to sort through raw logs and stitch together sessions after the fact, right? And they're trying to figure out what machines were involved, what people were involved, and then it's very difficult, very cumbersome, and takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So the modern attack, so an example, this is, we've taken this from Mandiant. They actually produced this a couple years ago, but and you see at the beginning here, right, the initial compromise, that's typically hours. When they exfiltrate the data and take it and they run away with it, typically only hours. All of the credential switching, all of the issues that, that we can't see today because it's users moving around our networks legitimately, are all happening within these stages, right? So typically when a bad guy comes in, he's going to escalate his own privileges. He's going to go to Active Directory. He's going to create his own account, right? So again, now you've got another legitimate account in your world. How do you determine that that's a legitimate account versus, a bad guy who's on your network moving around and trying to take stuff? So, the lateral movement piece I just touched on, and then, while they're data gathering. So again, all this time that's happening, this weeks or months in here, this is all legitimate traffic and legitimate user. It seems to be legitimate users. So very difficult for organizations to determine, again, is that Greg, the good guy doing that work today, or is that a bad guy? And if you base it on user behavior, right, and what's passed for me, what's normal, and then and while you're monitoring all of the sessions going forward in real time, you're able to determine if I deviate from what's normal and it's anomalous, I'm going to bubble that up, and I'll show you quickly here in a demo when we get to it how that works. So some detection examples in the SOC. So a couple here that are near and dear to my heart because they were a couple of my deals. But payroll company, we had a big deal that we did in June of this year, and 65,000 employees. They had a contractor come into their environment on their laptop, and the contractor's laptop was infected with the Sality virus. And so the folks at this company said, well, that's not really cool, because you saw the logs from McAfee, and McAfee told you that, and you put it in a pretty picture for us. That doesn't mean anything. So we were able to show them, okay, but they touched 33, it's really 58, but we got 33 on the slide. They touched 58 assets in your environment for the very first time in that session. So how do you know now that those assets aren't infected with the Sality virus from that one contractor's laptop and came in? So we're able to, again, in a session, capture all of that data, where people are coming from, where they're going to. The bottom one here, an HR employee's system connected to 1,700 POS systems at the same time. That was in one of our pilots, and they called us and said, you guys, the machine's broken, you got to come fix it, right? And so we said, no, let's take a look at it a little bit deeper. Again, Sality virus, which has been around for a long time and still exists, was infected. This machine was infected, and it went out and had touched 17 POS systems at the same, 1,700 POS systems at the same time. We were able to detect that, capture that that in the session and provide that back to the customer. The customer said, well, we have two-factor authentication all configured, so it still can't be possible. Well, it turns out two-factor auth was misconfigured, not configured properly when they set it up, and so they were able to do this, right? So this was a real example, and again, from a visibility standpoint, they would have never had the visibility into 1,700 POS systems at the same time, or 58, not 33, assets at the same time in a session where a user came in and was accessing those systems internally. So user behavior analytics to the rescue, right? So we rely on constant data science. We're creating a baseline of what's normal. So when we go in, and I'll show you, again, we're going to get to the demo here. I'll show you the demo. When we go in, whether it's a pilot or a deployment, a full deployment, we baseline. So we take historical logs from your systems internally, and I'll touch on that in a second, and we baseline what's normal for your users, right? So where are you coming in every day? What time are you working? What machines are you coming from? What are you going to? What VPNs are you using, right? And we're able to, through data science, apply histograms and custom algorithms to your users, right? To the behavior of every individual user. So we're able to sift through all of this raw information and show you in very simplistic format what's happening on your network from a user standpoint. Again, because these credentials are all being stolen today, it's not machines now, it's users that we need to keep an eye on. So how it works. So next slide's going to be demo. So we'll go into the demo. So we take very specific logs from your log repository. So today we support those: ArcSight, Q1, McAfee's Nitro, Splunk, and Security Analytics. So we can pull from big data environments as well, but we can't pull direct raw logs into Exabeam, and the reason for that is we didn't want to become another log repository. We don't want to be another SIM tool, right? Everybody has one of those, and they want to figure out how to make that better and optimize that tool that they already have. Once we've extracted that data, and again, we're looking for domain controller, VPN, Windows, and Unix server data, right? So all authentication logs we're pulling into our system. Once we pull that data into our system, we then enrich that data from your HR system, your Active Directory and LDAP systems. So we're tying specific users to those raw logs and that data that they're creating on the network, right, in every session they create. Now there's going to be a user assigned or associated with each session that they create. After we do that, we'll talk about stateful user tracking in the demo, but this is very unique to Exabeam. We have the capability to hold state on the entire session, so tying together all of those systems and the time that they're touching those systems, as well as if the user changes user credentials, which the bad guy is going to want to do, right? They're immediately going to want to change user credentials and move to something or someplace where they can get to the good data. So we're going to apply the behavior analysis to it, and then a risk engine. And again, I'll show you just here in a second the score, the risk score that we're going to show up. We're going to show what we're doing via the risk score is bubbling up the risky session very quickly. So Mary had mentioned, don't talk to me about OPM, right? But whether it's OPM, whether it's Target, whether it's Penn State School of Engineering, I believe it's Mandy, and again, that said, you know, the average day the hacker is, the bad guy is on the network is over 220 days. Average time is over 220 days. And they're going unnoticed on your networks and on our networks because they're using legitimate credentials, right? So once they move off of what's normal behavior for your users, we're able to bubble that up very quickly via a risk score. So instead of them having present on your network for a couple hundred days, right? Maybe it's only a couple days, or maybe it's only a couple hours because that risky behavior is so different from what's normal. All right. Oh, so we just touched on stateful user tracking, so I won't spend the time on this and how we're tying all that together. We'll go into a demo. But so what the value that we're bringing, right, is really the ability to detect, prioritize, and respond. So again, in all of the alerts that we're swimming in today, yep, go ahead.
What is different? What is so different by that user's activity? Is it that it's happening at 3 in the morning and the person normally logs in at 8 a.m.? Is that?
It could be. It could be that. It could be they're coming in from a machine that we've never seen them use before. It could be they're coming in from a geo or from an ISP that we've never seen them use before. We see in our some of our pilots, we see a non-exec accessing an exec laptop, right? So again, we own all of this data. It sits in logs, right? It sits in raw logs in these SIM tools, right? And in these log repositories. It's just how can we present it and make it, you know, very simplistic for people to get to the bottom of it. right? Mary touched on, just a second, sorry. Mary touched on the difficulty in getting, employees these days, right? So I think the unemployment rate is -5% in the security analytics space, right? And security analyst space. And so we're taking and I'll show you here in a second, and the ability to take a tier 3 analyst and say, go do your tier 3 stuff, push Exabeam down to this session review information down to a tier 1 or even an intern. It's that simple to discern whether or not it's a good session or a bad one. Yes, sir.
This is kind of a stupid question. I wasn't really paying much attention. Sorry.
Yeah.
But do you guys have like some sort of IDS-like thing going on where there's signature detection, and when something that has, like, for example, similar string handles in the network traffic to a known exploit coming from that user account, would it alert you over that?
So we're not touching any IDS stuff or signatures or network traffic. It's all user-focused and user-based, right? It's your behavior and what you've done and what's normal for you and where you're going next.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, no worries. No worries. That's fine. That's fine. So let me jump out of this and go to... So this is our UI. Okay, very simple, very straightforward, right? So at the top you see this is a snapshot of an organization. When we built the tool, we went out to a bunch of our friendly customers from our past and Imperva and said, hey, we want to build this new solution. Will you help us build it? And so we built it with design partners in the field, so it's real world, right? We didn't want to build the field to dream solution and hope people would want to use it, right? We built this with our partners in the field. So at the top you see there's 10,000 users in Active Directory, 2,300 are recent. So that's their active users in this organization, right? 8 are at risk, and the at risk are the notable users here. We'll talk about those sessions in a second. Assets, we have the ability to track assets and see assets in real time through the logs, right? So eBay is one of our customers, and they said, you know what, we like your tool much better for real-time asset visibility than we do, our typical asset tools, right? Sessions, the overall sessions that we've seen in Exabeam, the recent ones and the at-risk sessions, and the number of events. So the watch list piece is another feature request by one of our customers where they wanted better visibility to their execs. They also wanted better visibility if somebody came and said, hey, here's my 2-week notice. Or if in the event they had to do layoffs, right? They put people on a watch list that starts them out of the gate with a much higher risk score, so they've got higher visibility, right? So they're being watched, if you will, right? So you see CEO, the VP of sales, so the execs are on this watch list example. And then starred sessions are simply just a bookmark, right? So as a little bit of workflow, right? If you've got an analyst or an incident responder that's looking at Exabeam, they can't finish their work, they can bookmark it here. When they come back into Exabeam, they start. We're integrated to, when we talked about Splunk, QRadar, ArcSight, so we're integrated to those as well as ticketing systems. So we don't have to be another pane of glass, but we've noticed very quickly in a lot of our deployments, when we went in and sold the tool, they said, oh yeah, well, we don't want another pane of glass, we don't need one, but every time we go back and visit with them now in their data center and their SOC, Exabeam's up on the screen. So if we look at Barbara Salazar here, and we look at why she's got a risk score, a high risk score of 170, so we see that because we've enriched this data with Active Directory, LDAP, HR information, right? We've tied her contact info to these sessions that she's creating. So we know who's creating these sessions, right? So much like a credit card fraud call like we've all got, right? Hey, Greg, is that you that's traveling over here and spending all this money, right? Barbara, is that you creating this risky session that we're looking at? We've got her title, we've got her location, we've got her department. So not only are we baselining what's normal and looking at Barbara's behavior, but we're also comparing her to all of her peers, right? A lot of times we get the question, hey, you know what, guys, how do we know that you're not already ingesting a compromised user, right? So it's a bad behavior already, and we just never saw that, right? So by comparing that to the peer group, so if I'm one of 10 and 9 of my other peers aren't doing anything that I'm already doing, then we can see that very quickly, even in the initial data ingestion and baseline of your users. So if we scroll down here, you see, I'll click on the 1 month so we can see, but all the green dots are good sessions for what Barbara's created on the network. Again, we're capturing every session, good or bad, right? You'll want to have that visibility. When we get over here to the 170 score, so we want to see why she's created this risky session. The first reason, and we'll talk about the points and the scoring here in a second, first reason, and she's a non-exec trying to access an exec laptop. Again, so from one of our pilots, we had seen that a non-exec tried to access the CEO's laptop 4 times. And they said, oh boy, we need to go shut this down. First log on to Network Zone Dallas. So again, from a visibility standpoint, if we click on Dallas, we're going to show you here that she never logs on to the Dallas office network zone. Again, that's another thing the bad guy's going to want to do is change network zones, because typically the credential that they've got to get on your network is not going to get them to where they need to go. So they're going to try to move around the network. And again, we're seeing that through the logs. First use of service AV admin, so we're able to see that she changed credentials. First VPN connection from this specific device. FireEye security alert, so we're able to also ingest information from Symantec, from McAfee, from FireEye, from Bit9 Carbon Black, so any type of security tool that is on your network that has any user-centric information tied to it, you'll want us to bring it into Exabeam and tie it to the session that your users are creating, and we can do that. So if we click on the view session, we're going to go down into even deeper here, and I'm going to show you date timestamp of the session. There's 10 reasons, there's 8 events, there's 6 different assets. Again, back to that example where of 58 assets that I gave you before, we're capturing all the assets that this user is touching in this session, right? So again, from a visibility standpoint, if this person is infected, in this case, we're going to see there's a FireEye malware on this person's machine, you'll want to know where else this person went within your organization. So that contextual awareness that you can't get today just by having those raw logs, we're able to provide it to you. Much like the example from Dallas, we can now show you a global picture, right? So she's in Ukraine. She never logs in from the Ukraine. It's always from the United States, right? So we can provide that data. The next example on this, one other thing I wanted to show you, a VPN from Ukraine. We're also capturing, when I said the example of if she comes in from an unknown ISP, we'll capture that. We'll capture their IP, as well as we're capturing what your internal VPN is that they're using. Large organizations, a lot of organizations use multiple VPN vendors, right? And your analysts and responders are going to want to know that data if they're trying to triage something or just review it. At 12:30, we see 3 times remote access, right? So we've captured the fact that she's gone to these Windows servers. We're telling you which servers these are, but we're not putting it, we didn't assign any points to this because we don't want to be a noisy tool, right? We don't want to create a whole lot of alerts if we don't. So if we don't have to. This is part of Barbara's normal behavior. So even though it's part of a session that's risky, this is part of her normal behavior that she accesses these Windows servers. So we're not assigning any points, but still capturing that data for you. Remote log on to US terminal. You see this change icon here. This allows you, because of that stateful user tracking, we're able to track the fact that Barbara has changed her user credentials. Now she's service AV admin. And the fact that we're able to hold state on that session, and we can see here that she's gone to that US terminal as a service AV admin, and she's not the top user, nor is HR the top group that touches that machine ever, right? So again, as a responder, very quickly, you can determine here, this is very risky behavior and probably an issue. We see the FireEye Trojan alert here, and one more remote access to another server, and then ultimately the VPN logout. Now, as a responder, if I'm looking at this session, I can click on what we call data insights. And data insights is what's normal for this user. This is her normal workstation. These are the normal assets she touches from that workstation, the zones she logs onto, the countries she works from, and the time of week she's working. So again, all this data sitting in our logs from a bunch of different systems internally, we're able to just pull it into Exabeam, enrich that data, and present it to you in a very simplistic format. We have some integrations to Splunk. We can go into that maybe offline if we need to. What else can I show you? Any questions on the session and what the data we're capturing and how we're doing it?
So, like, what does this mean? Barbara's credentials are compromised? Or?
It could be Barbara's credentials are compromised, or if in the event your responder catches up with Barbara and she says, I'm on a vacation of a lifetime in the Ukraine, right, and I borrowed a friend's laptop and I'm VPNing in, I'm doing all this work, right, it may not mean it's necessarily, that she's been compromised, but it's risky behavior based on her past behavior. Yep, okay, and so just a couple of quick slides here, and I'll take some questions. So these are, we call the executive eye candy slides, right? So again, we're able to capture this. Where are your users working from? How are they connecting to your network? Where are the users traveling internationally? Today, this is not dynamic. It will be by the end of the year, so if I want to know who the 5 people are in Lithuania, I'll be able to click on that and say who my 5 employees capture this data, risk by department, user activity, inactive privilege users, service accounts. So we charge, it's a subscription-based solution, we charge by active user. We don't charge for service accounts, but we track them, we see them, and we're able to treat them the same as if it were an active employee. Questions? Ooh, this is good. Is that it? Am I out of time? Oh, question back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, good question. So your tool seems to be able to collect event sources, correct? Do you have multiple event sources you can collect, like FireEye?
Yes. So we collect those event sources as long as they're going into a SIM or a repository that we support. Can't take them direct into Exabeam. We're working on that, but our product just went GA this past February, so we just released Rev 2 2 weeks ago. So we're working on a generic connector and the ability to take logs more direct than if having to go through a SIM or one of the repositories we support.
Okay, and through those event sources, you're able to determine indicators of attack from some of the profiles you have, one of the examples there. Are you able to verify, like if something's been compromised, are you able to go in and verify like any IOCs that you have in it?
So IOCs.
Indicator of compromise, like if some endpoint was compromised or some person might be compromised, do you have the ability to actually verify that?
Right. So from the logs that the Splunk piece I didn't touch on, we have the ability. We have an integration back to a couple of our SIMs where you can kick off a query and actually pull the raw logs from the session that we reviewed. And what we've seen from our customers, they pull the raw logs and then do the additional forensic work to be able to say, okay, where else did they go? They can expand the timeline and determine, do we need to go see these other assets and see, if they're compromised as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
What's the back end on Exabeam?
The back end, so it's so we are a one-use single appliance that sits out of band. It just pulls the logs in real time, and it's a Linux-based
Relational database, MySQL.
MongoDB. Yeah, and it's written in Linux and Java. So pretty easy stuff. At its core, it's code at the core, but it's all configs above it. So making changes to the tool is very simple. I got one more case study I'll let you guys review, but this is, we can leave it up here for a second. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.